So this method I'm going to show you just a personal trick which I use in balancing chemical equation. So I believe if you learn this trick, it will guide you and make balancing equation very easy for you. So before you balance any chemical equation, there are steps I use. So the first step is balancing non-metals first. So my steps in balancing chemical equation. So the first one is balancing non-metals. So non-metals like nitrogen, sulfur, chlorine, and so on and so forth. Then the next step is by balancing metals. Metals like sodium, potassium, magnesium, and more. Then the next step is by balancing hydrogen. And the last is by balancing oxygen. So if you follow these steps, this will guide you to balancing chemical equation successfully. So let's start by the first equation. The first equation is when hydrogen gas reacts with oxygen gas to produce water. H2O. So when you look at this equation, like I do in the basic concepts, I'm going to bring them out. So for this, I'm going to split them into two. So this is H2.O. So if you look at this equation, hydrogen here is balanced as two atoms of oxygen, hydrogen are present there. But for oxygen here, we have just two here and we have just one here. So the oxygen is not balanced. So what I will do is to add two here. So anytime you add two to any equation that you split as thought, you should also add the two to this point because it affects the two atoms of any element present there. So since hydrogen here has increased to 4, I will now come here, add 2 here. So the hydrogen here is now 4, oxygen here is now 2, hydrogen here is 4, oxygen here is now, so the equation is now balanced. So when it is balanced like that, you now transfer your number of molecules to this particular one. So here we have 2 here, nothing is here, we have 2 here. So this simply signifies that this equation is balanced. Okay, let's say we have carbon plus O2 giving us CO. Now what this simply signifies that carbon is bound in oxygen carbon is bound in limited amount of oxygen. So if it is limited amount of oxygen, you're going to have carbon 2 oxide. So if we have this, now look at this equation. This equation balanced. The equation is not balanced because we have 2 atoms of oxygen here, while we have just 1 atom of oxygen here, whereas carbon are 1. So let's balance the equation. So what do? You bring it down the equation, the two reactants, and also bring down the product. So the product is split it with a dot. So now looking at this equation here, carbon is 1, which is according to the rules, balance what? Non-metals first. So non-metal first, carbon is a non-metal. So carbon is 1, carbon is balanced. So the next one is what? Metals. There's no metal present here. The next one is hydrogen. No oxygen, hydrogen present here. So the next one is oxygen. So oxygen here is 2, while oxygen here is 1. So what you do is that you add 2 here. Same time you add 2 here, make sure you also add 2 here. So if you add 2 there, that means that carbon has also increased to 2. So if carbon has increased to 2, you come here and add 2 here. So if you do that, you see that carbon here is 2, oxygen here is 2, carbon here is 2, and oxygen here is what? 2. So that means the equation is balanced. So you now transfer your answer to this point here, 2 and 2. So this simply shows that that equation is actually balanced. So we have KClO3 giving you KCl plus O2. So let's go on by splitting our compound. So if we split potassium, chlorine, and O3. So for this we have potassium, chlorine, and then the oxygen O2. So let's look at the equation now. So the first thing is to balance what? Non-metals. So which are the non-metals there? Chlorine. So chlorine here is 1, and chlorine here is also what? 1. So that means that the non-metals are balanced. So the next thing is metal. Metal is potassium and potassium here. Potassium here is 1, potassium here is also 1. So it is balanced. So the next one is oxygen. Oxygen here is 3, while oxygen here is 2. So what you need to do is to add 3 oxygen here. If you add 3 oxygen here, that means the oxygen has increased to 6 here. So what do we need to do to make this also increase to 6 is by adding 2 here. So if you add 2 here, oxygen has also increased to 6. So it will also affect this one also. So 2, 2. Now, if it has affected this also, that means that chlorine here is 2, potassium here is 2, and potassium here is 1. So you add 2 here and also add 2 here to balance on this. So we have 2. So if you look at it now, potassium 2, chlorine 2, oxygen 6, potassium 2, chlorine 2, oxygen 6. So the equation is balanced. So you now find our answer to the main equation. So we have here for this we have 2, for this we have 2, for this we have 3. So the equation is balanced. So I'm going to end this video to make it so that the video will not be too long. So you watch out for the next video on how to balance chemical equation with this trick. Bye for now.